Okay, let's just get right into it. The AI tools that we're all using every single day for writing emails, for searching, for making images, they have this really fundamental, kind of hidden flaw. They see the world through a very, very specific lens. And, for most people on Earth, it's the wrong one.
And look, this isn't just some small technical glitch we're talking about. It's actually becoming a huge geopolitical issue. As NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang says here, AI isn't just about code anymore. It's becoming a vessel for national identity. So the stakes are getting incredibly high. The big question is, can AI actually help preserve a culture, or is it just going to override?
The whole problem really starts with the data. It's what researchers call the weird problem. You see, since AI learns from a diet that's mostly English language internet data from Western countries, it naturally develops a default worldview. And for the vast majority of the planet, this creates this profound cultural misalignment. Some people are even calling it a new form of digital colonization. So, okay, if the data is biased, how in the world do we fix it? Well, that brings us to our first section, the AI culture clash. See, before we can even start to teach an AI about different cultures, we all have to agree on what culture even means to a machine. And that, it turns out, is a surprisingly tough question to answer. So researchers have tried to break this down into 4 distinct layers. First, you've got knowledge. That's the easy stuff, the basic facts like holidays, historical figures, that kind of thing. Then you get to norms, which are all the unwritten social rules. Go a little deeper and you hit values. That's a culture's moral compass. And finally, there's linguistics, which is all about how language itself, through idioms and nuance, shapes how you see the world. Let's make this a little more concrete with an example from that norms layer. Tipping, right? In the United States, it's pretty much expected. It's how you show appreciation. But in Japan, it can actually be seen as an insult, kind of implying the service wasn't good enough to be included in the price. So just imagine an AI trying to give travel advice. Getting a simple rule like this wrong can cause some very real-world awkward friction. Which, of course, brings us to our next section. How do we actually test an AI's cultural IQ? I mean, how do you measure this stuff? Well, to solve this, researchers have been building this really fascinating toolkit of tests, or benchmarks, and each one has a totally different philosophy for measuring cultural awareness. Okay, so the first approach is pretty straightforward. It's basically an exam, but instead of being written by teachers for students, it's crafted by cultural experts specifically for AIs. Their whole job is to come up with these tricky questions that go way beyond simple memorization to test if the AI truly gets the cultural context. And a perfect example of this is Cultural Bench. It has almost 1,700 questions covering 45 different regions, with a really strong focus on the Global South. Now, there's a big pro and a big con here. The pro is that these human-written questions test for real reasoning, which is fantastic. The con, though, is that it's currently English only. And that's a problem, because we can't be sure if an AI fails because it doesn't have the cultural knowledge, or if it just got lost in translation. All right, this next approach is less like a trivia game and a lot more like a personality test. Here, researchers use these well-established frameworks from sociology to try and map out the AI's underlying values. Is it more individualistic or more collectivistic? Does it lean more towards authority or more towards liberty? And CD Eval does exactly this. It uses Hofstede's famous cultural dimensions theory, a framework that measures things like individualism versus collectivism. Now, this is super useful because it gives us a language to talk about an AI's bias. We can literally say, this model scores really high on individualism. The major risk, though, and it's a big one, is that you just can't boil down an entire complex culture to a few numbers without accidentally promoting stereotypes. So our third approach basically treats the AI like it's a person being surveyed. It asks the model these subjective questions about social and political issues, and then it compares the AI's answers to actual public opinion data from real people in different countries. And the results are, well, they're pretty stark. This chart shows it perfectly. Benchmarks like one called Global Opinion QA consistently find this massive gap. These so-called aligned models, the ones fine-tuned to be safe and helpful, are almost perfectly aligned with public opinion in the global north. But they show really, really low alignment with the views of the global south. This all leads us to a really critical point in Section 3, the imperfect ruler. Because while these tests are the absolute best tools we have right now, let's be honest, they are far from perfect. Trying to put a number on something as fluid and complex as culture is just riddled with challenges. So yeah, these measurements come with some huge caveats. We've already talked about the risk of promoting stereotypes. They're also heavily biased toward English. And AI's answers can completely change if you just tweak the prompt a little, which suggests it might just be mimicking values, not actually holding them. And a test can't tell the difference between a country's average opinion and all the rich diversity of views inside that country. So you're probably asking yourself, okay, if the ruler is so flawed, why even bother measuring this stuff? And the answer is one of the single biggest trends in both geopolitics and tech right now, the race for what's being called sovereign AI. You see, nations all over the world see building their own AI not just as some economic goal, but as a fight for their cultural survival. Countries like France, India, Japan, they're pouring billions of dollars into creating models that reflect their own values, their own history, their own common sense. And for them, these imperfect benchmarks are the only tool they have to check their work, to audit their massive investment, and to prove that their model is actually a better fit for their citizens than a generic one from Silicon Valley. So let's move to our final section, which kind of builds on everything we've just talked about. We mentioned a core limitation of today's AIs is that their knowledge is basically frozen in time. So this brings us to a really interesting potential solution for the future. Okay, on the left here is how we do it today. All of an AI's knowledge is basically compressed into its programming during training. It's a lossy process. It forgets the details. But on the right is a new idea called General Agentic Memory, or GAM. With GAM, the AI stores high-fidelity information in this external searchable library and just pulls it out just in time when it's needed. Think of it like the difference between trying to remember a book you read a year ago versus having that book right in front of you, open to the exact page you need. And this changes everything. The whole paradigm shifts from testing static, encyclopedic knowledge to testing dynamic memory and application. The most important skill for an AI won't be just knowing a fact, but being able to retrieve the right cultural context from its memory and apply it consistently throughout a really long conversation. And so that leaves us with this final, fascinating question to think about. As we build these new systems, is the most culturally intelligent AI going to be the one that has simply memorized the most facts? Or will it be the one that has a perfect adaptable memory? The one that doesn't just know your culture, but actually remembers it?